Thank you for checking out Murder Dictionary Podcast. I just wanted to give a quick disclaimer that we are still learning the ropes of audio and podcasting in general. The sound quality and content will get better as we get more experience, so please bear with us through this learning curve. We focus mostly on the murderers, so some listeners may feel that the subject is approached too lightheartedly and with a lack of focus on the victims. Although we want to be sensitive to that, we cannot help but focus on the details or facts that we find most fascinating. And for us, that is often the life of the murderer and the details of the crimes. We appreciate you checking us out and hope that you are also interested in the stories that we are intrigued enough by to explore. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes.
Let's say you just bought a house. Bad news is, you're one step closer to becoming your parents. You'll proudly mow the lawn, ask if anybody noticed you mowed the lawn, tell people to stay off the lawn, compare it to your neighbor's lawn, and complain about having to mow the lawn again. Good news is, it's easy to bundle home and auto through Progressive and save on your car insurance, which, of course, will go right into the lawn. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discount not available in all states or situations.
And welcome to Murder Dictionary Podcast. My name is Brianna, and with me is Kelly.
Yo.
So before we get started, I just wanted to remind everybody that we are on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So please go and check us out there. We would really appreciate it if you guys would rate, review, and subscribe. That would be awesome. If you could also tell all of your friends about us, anybody that is a true crime fanatic like us that would like hearing what we have going on with this little murder dictionary thing, we would love it if you could shout us out.
Tell your grandma.
Your grandma loves murder. You don't even know it, but if you tell her, she's going to be like, Murder Dictionary is my favorite. So
way to go, Nana.
She has good taste. Don't forget to go to the street corner and just yell about us.
Murder Dictionary!
Say it really fast so that people don't get scared off by the murder or like try and tackle you.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents. Like, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life, but just really fast. That'll help. Thank you guys again for tuning in. We're doing a little holiday episode with some Christmas murders today. All of these crimes have occurred around the Christmas season. So our first gift to you for the holidays is that I'm not even going to do an intro.
You're welcome.
I have no psychology or any sort of breakdown or anything to add. We're just going to get straight to the murder.
Shit just happens on Christmas. The worst things happen.
The worst. So we're just going to get into it.
Yeah, let's do a Hanukkah one next year.
I didn't even look that up, but I feel like we should.
8 days of murder.
Oh, that would
Death
be
by
amazing.
dreidel.
Yes.
Down.
So Kelly's going to kick it off.
So the first murder starts with Sylvia Ortega and Bruce Pardo, who got married in January of 2006. Soon after, when Mr. Pardo refused to open a joint account with Mrs. Pardo, they began to have marital problems.
Finance and romance.
Bruce also expected Mrs. Pardo to take care of her own 3 children from a previous relationship with her own money. And in 2008, he split from his wife. According to reports, the reason for their separation was that she was unaware that he had a secret child with another woman, and the child had brain damage from a pool accident years earlier.
Yeah, it seemed like the accident was not a big deal.
Yeah.
However, she just flat out didn't know about him. Mm-hmm. But it was also kind of a side note that he was neglecting this child that was clearly special needs, you know? As if the whole financial thing and making her support her own kids and all that wasn't douchebaggy enough. Yeah. Just on top of that, abandoning a sick child. I think she was scared off.
They say more money, more problems, but I say no money, no problems.
You're a wise woman.
Pardo was required to pay Sylvia $10,000 as part of the divorce settlement, as well as $1,800 a month in alimony, according to court documents.
That seems high.
It's really high. I asked my parents about this, and
really?
Yeah, they were like, it's not, I mean, I was like, I'm never getting married, so don't expect it. I was like, this is stupid.
That's just a lot of money.
And I think it's whoever has the most money has to pay it out. Yeah. So if I'm the breadwinner, I mean, I just don't want people taking...
So always be the underachiever.
Exactly.
That's the lesson here. Yeah, never be the breadwinner.
Don't make money. Exactly. Sylvia kept the wedding ring and the family dog. In a court declaration, Pardo complained that Sylvia was living with her parents, not paying rent, and had spent lavishly on a luxury car and gambling trips to Las Vegas. Also meals at fine restaurants, massages, and golf lessons.
She's living the life.
I mean, that would piss someone off. I think just, I mean, not to victim blame, but damn, you're really...
Yeah.
I mean, he was already crazy about money and...
Right. Clearly, this is a sore spot for him.
Yeah.
But then she went out and just spent all of his money on this crazy stuff.
She balled so hard. A friend of Bruce's said he was furious about the settlement and alimony and said his ex was taking him to the cleaners.
I really want to know where that saying came from, and I should have looked it up. I think we need to start a second podcast on where sayings come from.
The cleaners is pretty cheap usually, right?
Like, I see signs like $1.25 a garment. That doesn't seem like a lot of money.
Maybe it's because laundry sucks and you hate doing it, you know?
That could be it.
In July, Bruce was fired from his job as an electrical engineer at ITT Electronic Systems, radar systems, for falsely billing extra hours. On December 18, 2008, Bruce Pardo's divorce from his estranged wife was finalized. And on Christmas Eve 2008, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo put on a Santa suit and headed over to a party at his former in-laws' place around 11 p.m. in Covina. In addition to the Santa suit, Pardo also brought wrapped presents. However, the presents he brought with him were actually 4 9mm semi-automatic handguns and a homemade fucking flamethrower.
So Mad Max.
Flamethrowers. How the fuck did you make a flamethrower?
I have no idea. That is crazy.
My idea of a flamethrower would just put a lot of gasoline in my mouth and...
Like Kiss?
Yeah.
You're just Gene Simmons is the best flamethrower you could come up with.
When he entered the home, he began shooting at random. After shooting many more members of his former wife's family, he used his makeshift flamethrower to douse the house in gasoline and set it on fire. In the end, 9 people, including his ex-wife and former in-laws, were killed by gunshot wounds or flames. 3 additional victims were wounded, but survived. There was one survivor who called 911 during the attack after escaping to a neighbor's house. The resulting fire soared approximately 40 to 50 feet and took 80 firefighters an hour and a half to extinguish.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, getting shot's bad, but I'm afraid of heights, so jumping out that window.
Damn. Fuck. Burning, that's the thing.
Burning, yeah.
Every episode, it's just like, I don't want to die like that. I don't want to do that.
And I noticed, too, I laugh about a lot of things, and I wanted to say as a disclaimer, it's not because... it's actually funny. I'm just really uncomfortable. And some shit is really funny.
Yeah, it just makes me uncomfortable to think about it. So I'm like, nervous. Like, please don't let this happen to me.
After the attack, Pardo took off the Santa suit that witnesses saw him in and drove his Dodge Caliber rental car to his brother's house in Selmar, approximately 30 miles away from the crime scene. And only 4 miles away from me.
Holler.
It was initially believed that Pardo had intended to flee to Canada by plane since he had bought an airline ticket for a flight on Air Canada and had emptied his bank account.
Wait, you're going to go to the most peaceful place after you did... I'm ditching my flamethrower and all these guns wrapped as presents and going just to like chill out in Canada.
Canada. I mean, you might need the flamethrower to like, you know, take down all the ice and stuff. However, it was subsequently discovered that he had purchased a flight from Los Angeles to Moline, Illinois, with a layover in Minnesota. Pardo had called an old high school friend days before to tell him that he was planning to visit, but investigators are unsure if he intended to go or if the flight and call was only a method of throwing the detective off his trail.
Yeah, it was premeditated enough that could possibly be something where he just wanted the police to explore different options so he could go do something else. That may not have even, none of those things may have been his plan, you know?
Yeah, I don't think I would go to, I would probably go to Florida right after I killed someone because
you could just hide out amongst all the other crazy murderers.
They'll probably stumble upon another murderer, so.
You're just a needle in the haystack in Florida.
However, due to suffering from severe third-degree burns stemming from the blaze, he decided to go against the initial plan. He was too severely injured to board a flight and unable to get treated at a hospital for fear of being arrested. He changed plans and ended up dying of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in his brother's house that evening. Police found $17,000 in cash, cling-wrapped on his legs and inside a girdle. His rental car was found parked 1 block from his brother's house and was rigged with explosives that were set to detonate when the Santa suit was moved. A bomb squad fired an incendiary device into it, destroying and burning it. At Pardo's house in Montrose, police recovered 5 empty boxes from recently purchased semi-automatic handguns, 2 shotguns, and a container for high-octane gasoline. It was also later revealed that he had planned to kill his own mother after the massacre at his former in-laws' home, due to her apparent sympathy for Sylvia during the divorce proceedings.
She picked a side.
Yeah.
You don't sound like the nicest guy, you know?
You know what this guy could have done? Since he just got laid off, he could have gone on welfare. And I'm sure when you're under a certain amount, you don't have to pay alimony.
Right. He could have gone back to the courts and say, hey, I'm not working anymore. We need to revisit this.
They do that with child support.
All the time. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't have been that big of a deal. You didn't have to bring a flamethrower into this.
And shoot an 8-year-old.
Right?
Jesus. And ruin everyone's Christmas, the best holiday ever.
Thanks for taking a shit on Christmas, dude.
Explosives on Christmas. What a fucking dick.
Yeah, that one was gnarly. And it's in our area. It's so local.
I remember this. I totally remember listening to this. My parents were talking about it.
It sounds like vaguely familiar, but I don't think I knew all the details. Like, I just knew that there was some sort of crime, but it didn't really hit me, the gravity of what he did, you know?
If this wasn't a real life thing, it would make a great movie scene.
That's like the sequel to Home Alone. Kevin gets super mad that he was left and he just loses his shit. Anyway, on to our next one.
Another local.
Oh, hometowns. So we've got the Perelson family. According to his neighbors, Dr. Harold Perelson was a respectable family man and cardiologist, residing in the nice Los Feliz area of Los Angeles.
It is nice.
Super nice. Ugh. Love it.
Too expensive, though.
Way too expensive. Perelson was described as mild-mannered, but he seemed to be in a lot of financial trouble.
Mo money?
Exactly. Financial genius Kelly over there. Also, it just seems anyone that is referred to as mild-mannered, they're going to kill someone every time. You can count on it. A business partner had stolen all the rights to a medical device that they developed together and sunk thousands of dollars into developing. Harold hemorrhaged even more money into the ordeal after fighting a long legal battle with his former business partner, but he only won $23,900 in the end.
$956? And that's weird that they are so specific.
I know.
Like, how do they figure that out?
I just shortened it. I was like, yeah, close enough. 900, whatever.
You rounded like a normal person.
Like someone that's not a fucking asshole. In 1957, the Perelson children, 18-year-old Judy, 13-year-old Debbie, and 11-year-old Joel, were all in a car accident at the intersection of Vermont and Los Feliz Boulevard. Perelson sued the other driver involved, but won only enough to cover the medical bills. I bet he thought he was going to come up, right?
I mean, he should have.
Yeah, I know.
You got your 3 kids. You're in a...
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Everybody had injuries and everything. He should have won more, but whatever. In a letter to her aunt in late 1958, Judy said, "My parents, so to speak, are in a bind financially." Around that time, the Perelson family began reporting to friends and neighbors that Harold was suffering from coronaries. He was hospitalized multiple times for these coronaries. However, it was revealed later that they were actually suicide attempts, and that Perelson had been committed for mental health reasons, not coronaries.
Coronaries are like blood clots, right?
Whatever you say, bro. You're the resident Murder Dictionary medical advisor. I'm going to defer to you on that one. After enjoying a calm dinner one night in December 1959, 50-year-old Harold Perelson put his 3 children to bed. He went to sleep soon after, but awoke at 4 a.m. and went to the garage to get a ball-peen hammer. I don't even know what a ball-peen hammer is for other than murder.
I do.
Oh, shit!
I Googled it.
You're also our resident tool man.
Oh, man.
I'm going to call you Home Improvement from now on.
Tim Allen minus the Coke. Oh, man. So a ball peen hammer is one of... Okay, so you know the regular hammers with the two little pegs at the end?
Yeah.
That's a normal hammer. That's used for like regular...
Because then you can remove nails with it.
You can do all that. So the other one is specifically for steel and metal items. So it's meant to really do some damage. It's the ones with the balls on the end instead of the little
I can
spikes.
picture it, but I just didn't know what it was used for.
Yeah,
so it's specifically for metal.
So it'll really... It's meant to hit things with steel.
Really
so
destroy.
It's bad.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fucking...
I had no idea.
You're welcome.
Well, that makes sense. Damn, thanks. So he returned to his bedroom and pummeled his 42-year-old wife Lillian's head. He left her to asphyxiate on her own blood, and he went into his teenage daughter Judy's room, where he struck her in the head with the same hammer. However, the hit was off, so she was only wounded and stunned. Judy started screaming, and the neighbors reported hearing screams of, "Don't kill me," as her father told her, "Lay still and keep quiet."
Oh, fuck no.
Yeah. Nope. No thanks.
No. Mm-mm.
Judy escaped, found her mother, then ran out of the house.
Run, Judy, run.
Right?
Fuck.
She made it to the neighbor's house and they called the police. Thank God.
Jesus.
Back in the house, when Judy's two younger siblings woke up, the father told them, "Go back to bed. This is a nightmare."
That's like kind of, I mean, not good. I mean, it's fucked what he's doing, but at least he didn't hit the little ones in there.
Yeah, but it also makes me think he clearly had something against the oldest child and his wife.
Yeah.
But then the younger kids he never intended to hurt?
Maybe the one was just like her mom. Maybe Judy was
maybe.
like a spitting image of her mom and he just fucking hated her.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just confusing.
Or maybe
to me.
he only kills people of legal age. Stupid.
So the younger children were waiting on the first floor when their neighbor, Marshall Ross, arrived.
Two of my favorite stores.
It's a great combo.
I like this guy.
Ross went upstairs and found Harold covered in blood, who told him to leave him alone. Harold then went to the bedroom and took 2 doses of Nembutal and 31 small white pills. Reports vary that the white pills were either codeine or a powerful tranquilizer.
And Nembutal is a barbiturate, so he's already like woozy. And 31 small white pills?
Yeah, that's crazy. There were also rumors that Dr. Perelson drank a bottle of acid.
What kind of acid?
Right?
Like
I
the
don't
good
know.
kind or the bad kind?
I have no idea. That, I don't know. After dosing himself, Harold went to the living room and laid down. He was dead before the ambulance arrived, leaving all his children alive. His motive for the murders remains a mystery.
This guy's a big pussy. I don't like him. That's actually an insult to pussies. So.
Yeah, don't be mean to pussies like that. That's mean. Internet rumors say that there's still a Christmas tree and wrapped presents in the house from the night in 1959. Trespassers have also found SpaghettiOs and Life magazines laying around. Many visitors also share stories of how the home is haunted as well. Everyone who visits the property claims to feel a deep unease, dread, and urge to flee the property immediately.
I want to go there.
I know, right?
Let's do it.
There's a rumor that another family briefly rented the house after the Perelsons, and that it's actually their Christmas tree in the living room. The renting family reportedly was terrified by paranormal activity in the house and fled the home on the anniversary of the Perelson murder, leaving their wrapped presents behind and never coming back.
That's creepy.
Yep.
It was definitely their SpaghettiOs, though, too, because I did some research. SpaghettiOs weren't invented till 1965. But Time Magazine, it could have been, because that was 1936.
Our resident SpaghettiOs and magazines aficionado over there.
Oh, shit. I was like, that doesn't make sense. How? And then, because I was like, SpaghettiOs in 1959. But
Yeah.
I guess, 65.
Really?
Yeah, 1965.
That's weird.
Yeah,
Maybe
so-
they said SpaghettiOs, but it was another brand or something?
Maybe.
I don't
think
know.
it was definitely the
Because-
second family's.
Yes, I think that, now people know that it was definitely the second families.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't think it was long after It had to be before 1960 because in 1960, the house was sold in a probate auction to a couple from Lincoln Heights named Emily and Julian Enriquez. But for some reason, they never moved in.
Fucking SpaghettiOs everywhere.
Emily Enriquez died in 1994, and her son Rudy, who lived in Washington Heights, inherited the house. Still, nobody moved in.
Creepy.
Yeah. In 2009, Rudy Enriquez told the Los Angeles Times, "I don't know that I want to live there or even stay at the house at all." Instead, he used the property as storage. Rudy Enriquez died sometime in 2015 and had no children to pass on the house to. That means the Los Feliz murder house is probably out of stagnancy and into limbo for the first time since the murders. Considering the neighborhood is quite desirable, even with its dark history, the house will almost certainly fetch several $1 million.
Because it's in Los Feliz.
Yup.
Pop-up podcast inside the house.
Reporting live on the scene. Where absolutely nothing is happening, but we're super scared.
And covered in SpaghettiOs. I'm currently laying on top of 4 Time magazines. No ghosts, though.
I know, right?
I can't wait for I mean, I don't know if I'm ready to see a ghost, but I can't wait for the day. My world is rocked.
You go searching for them, though.
I do.
That's why I like sharing ghost stories with you.
Love
you're just like,
places.
I want to go to a haunted hospital.
Did it?
You could not pay me enough.
It was so fun. Mental institutions are the best. Oh, there's always a lot of cats. Always.
Really?
Fantastic for me. It's like
Cats?
creepy stuff and kitties. Yeah, the one I went to, the Loma Linda one was like, there was just cats. You could see them everywhere.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Dang.
The next story we have involves Lee Shelton, who was born in Texas in 1865 and would become the source of a legendary American folktale, retold countless times. He relocated to St. Louis, Missouri, and became a carriage driver. Soon after moving, he gained a reputation as a pimp and gambler.
I wish I had a better reputation. I feel like mine's just like being anxious and awkward. I want to be a fucking gambler pimp.
Oh, you's a pimp.
Thanks, Kel.
He served as a captain in a politically minded social group called the 400 Club. Many members of the 400 Club had dubious reputations for their rowdy and sometimes violent behavior. Lee Shelton was not just a common pimp. He belonged to a group of pimps known in the St. Louis areas as the Macs. I just imagine a bunch of Macs from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, just like 5 of them.
That's way too many. That's so much karate.
There's like 2 fat Macs, 3 skinny Macs. They were not just common street strollers of the day. The Macs group members were all showy and over the top. They were the first pimps who stopped trying to blend in to avoid detection. Instead, they were flamboyant and flashy. It's kind of weird to me that pimps are involved politically. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if that was common of all of them, but certainly this one. Yeah.
I'm going to vote next time for Silky Johnson. From Those are the pimps I'd like to see in office. Shelton was nicknamed Staggerly, Stagly, or Stackly, possibly because he went stag, meaning he was without friends. It is also rumored that he was called Stag for short for staggered due to his excessive alcohol consumption. They'd call me Pukey. Pukely. Still, other reports say he took the nickname from a well-known riverboat captain called Stack Lee. There were also reports that the nickname actually came from a riverboat owned by the Lee family of Memphis called the Stack Lee. The riverboat of his reported namesake was known for its on-board prostitution.
There's like 7 different versions of that.
Yeah.
Damn.
They're all equally cool.
Right?
On Christmas night, 1895, 30-year-old Shelton ran into his acquaintance, 25-year-old William Billy Lyons, at a local bar. Yeah. They were cordial and started a conversation. They knew each other well enough to know that they had differing political views. Lyons was also a member of the St. Louis underworld and was rumored to be both a political and business rival to Shelton. The political climate at the time was extremely tense, and because St. Louis was one of the largest cities in the country at the time, it was necessary for politicians to get every vote. This became increasingly relevant as the Republicans were losing their stronghold. Because Shelton was a Democratic organizer and Lyons a Republican one, the discussion became tense. Both men had been drinking excessively. nothing bad's going to happen.
No, it's going to go great.
So when the discussion went to politics, an argument erupted.
Oh, I thought they were just going to dance or something.
Should have gone with religion. That's always a good one to talk about. First, Shelton crushed Lion's derby hat. Lion's demanded... I know. Disrespect. Lyons demanded to be reimbursed for the ruined hat and stole Shelton's Stetson off his head to hold it hostage while demanding payment. Shelton then drew his gun and smacked Lyons on the head with it. Lyons lunged at Shelton, so Shelton shot him in the abdomen.
Dude, I didn't know hats were such a big deal.
I know.
I mean, I see everyone wearing them, but this seems crazy.
Don't touch my hat. Maybe he was bald. People get really mad when they're bald and you take off their hat.
Right.
Or like, I do the same thing when someone takes off my beanie and I have really bad hat hair. I fucking lose my shit.
You could have had terrible hat hair. Yeah. It was just embarrassment.
It's just so embarrassing.
This could have been really, really solved if we had better products.
A little mousse. Lyons eventually died of his injuries. Shelton was tried and convicted for the crime in 1897 and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was paroled in 1909 after serving only 12 years, but was imprisoned again 2 years later for assault and robbery. You'd be on your best fucking behavior after being...
Right?
People are dumb. He died of tuberculosis in the hospital of the Missouri State Penitentiary on March 11th, 1912. I didn't realize what a lisp I have until I start listening to myself. You can tell I drool.
It's cute.
Just spit everywhere. I feel bad for your little mic thing.
I wash everything after we record. You have no idea how much saliva is on there.
It's because you lick it all the time. I don't know why you stare me in the eyes when you lick it.
It's a little creepy, but I'm cool.
Shelton became an icon as a symbol for toughness and style in the minds of early folk and blues musicians, which inspired the popular folk song Stagger Lee. The song is one of the most re-recorded in history, with well over 400 different artists making their own versions. There are recordings from the Black Keys, Samuel Jackson.
I had no idea until I was researching this that I guess he records music.
That's the version I want to hear.
I don't think I want to hear any other music other than Samuel L. Jackson from this day forward.
Say Stagger Lee again. One more time. The Fabulous Thunderbirds, Wilson Pickett, Taj Mahal, Fats Domino, Bob Dylan, Beck, Elvis Presley, and many others were the ones who recorded this song. I did a Spotify search and listened to the Grateful Dead version.
Oh,
it wasn't good. No,
yeah,
not good at all.
I mean, I sometimes like Grateful Dead, but usually, you know.
I should have added some weed into the mix.
Right? Like,
I knew we were recording and I didn't want to be high. So. Shelton is buried at the historic Greenwood Cemetery in Hillsdale, Missouri. In 2013, the Killer Blues Headstone Project raised enough money to get a headstone for his unmarked grave, which was placed in the cemetery during a public ceremony.
Aww.
What did they do? The Killer Blues, I mean, I guess it's kind of
Maybe it was just for him. I didn't even look into it, but it could be just a little foundation for him.
I mean, they're a whole project foundation thing.
Or there's a ton of blues musicians that killed people.
That don't have headstones.
Or maybe they just protect the legacy of people that are the source of these stories. Because these are all like old folklore. And then maybe at the time they didn't really have the money to give them headstones or whatnot. A lot of people had really unmarked graves or mass graves. So maybe they go back and help people out or families out that didn't afford it at the time. Who knows? But we're going to find that out or not. We're not.
Or not. Yeah,
definitely not.
Definitely not.
All right. Our last one is a little bit long. It starts off in Ashland, Kentucky in 1881. It was a sleepy little town off the Ohio River. The residents of Ashland liked that their city was a calm, safe place. Like any town, it had its share of crime. But the very few homicides that did happen in the town usually resulted from fights between drunken men over either a card game or a woman, and they required little or no detective work to solve.
100 years later, and we still fight over the same shit.
Same old
always
thing.
Booze and women and cards.
The Gibbons family was an average Ashland household of the time. Almost everyone in the town knew the Gibbons family, and by all accounts, they were very well liked. There were 3 children. The oldest was 17-year-old Robert, who was disabled after losing a leg in a freight car accident. The youngest was the precocious and energetic 11-year-old Sterling. And then there was the daughter, Fanny. 14-year-old Fanny, a mature and womanly young teenager, was already quite popular with classmates and men.
How are you popular with men at 14?
Yeah, that's not good.
Weird.
They liked her.
Oh, it's 1881.
Yeah, there's that. That's a factor for sure. She was a neighborhood favorite with a magnetic personality and looks that earned her a lot of attention. I know. It just makes me sad. I feel like even 10 or 20 years ago, people had been like, oh, she sounds beautiful. But nowadays, we're just like, that's not good.
Yeah.
That's not going to lead to anything good. She was an outgoing and cheerful with many friends, but she also had some not so welcome aggressive suitors.
Ew.
Yep. Their father, John Gibbons, wasn't home very much and worked very long hours that kept him away from his family a lot. However, the relationship between him and his wife, Martha Gibbons, worked out quite well that way. He worked odd jobs and was often gone for weeks. He provided a meager income that supported his family about as well as anyone else in working-class Ashland. The mother, Martha, by all accounts, was a caring mother, and the family was active with the neighbors in the community. On December 23, 1881, at around 6 p.m., Mrs. Gibbons and her youngest son, 11-year-old Sterling, went across the street to visit their neighbors, the Thomas family. Martha explained to Mrs. Thomas that her and her younger son were going across the river to Ironton, Ohio, to visit family, and they would be gone until the next day. As usual, Mrs. Gibbons was off working somewhere, and Martha wanted her older children to have some company. She asked if her 16-year-old daughter, Emma Carrico, could stay at the Gibbons house overnight to hang out with Fanny and Robert.
That's the Thomas's daughter. Emma's the Thomas's daughter. Okay.
She had a different name. I believe it was from a previous marriage. Okay. Thomas readily agreed, so Emma put on her coat and said goodbye to her mother. It was the last time that she saw her alive. That crisp, wintry, clear December night, neighbors reported hearing the three teenagers talking and laughing in the early evening until it was time to go to bed. Then silence. Mrs. Thomas woke up around 4 a.m. and glanced out the window across the street to the house her daughter Emma was sleeping over at, and she saw nothing unusual at the Gibbons home. She went about her morning chores, and when she next looked out, it was shortly after 6 a.m. She noticed an unnatural light flickering through the window inside the Gibbons house. At first, she believed it was possibly a reflection of the moon, until she heard a hysterical woman running across the street screaming, "Fire!" Early Christmas Eve morning, many Ashland residents were woken up by the alarm of a fire at the Gibbons' small house. In a matter of minutes, many concerned townspeople rushed to the flames that lit up the sky. Fighting their way inside the burning house, they were horrified to find 3 bodies, which they dragged out from the flames. Neighbors recognized the bodies as being Fanny Gibbons, who was 14, her brother, 17-year-old Robert, and the 15-year-old neighbor friend, Emma Carrico. This one's mad serious. I didn't realize.
It's very serious.
I know.
It's good, though. It's a good story.
3 physicians were soon on the scene to inspect the bodies and discovered that all 3 victims had their skulls smashed, which was the cause of death before the fire. Evidence was also discovered that led the physicians to conclude that the girls had been brutally raped. The fire, it was decided, had been set after the rapes and murders to cover up the crime. Evidence was searched for under the smoldering house. Bloody sheets and pillows were found, and there was an axe and a crowbar, both covered with hair and blood. These items were all set aside as evidence, in addition to the victims' pajamas.
Thank God they pulled those bodies out.
I know.
That's crazy.
I think it's awesome that there were so many concerned citizens that just showed up and started to help, and if they could do something or knew something or were a physician, that they could just jump in.
3 physicians on Christmas.
Right?
That's good.
As dawn broke, news of the crimes quickly spread through the entire town, and residents were in a frenzy. The public was shocked by the brutality of the murders. This was not the Ashland that they knew. The townspeople felt that no one would be safe until the murderers were found and brought to justice. All business was suspended as the grief spread throughout the town, and community members started trading rumors and speculating possible suspects. 2 days later, on December 26th, an overflow crowd turned out for service at the Methodist Episcopal Church, where services were held for the 3 victims. Afterwards, they were buried in a...
Today's
Do you
rough.
ever feel like someone just takes over your body?
Yeah.
Did I just say buried?
Buried.
What am I? Afterwards, they were buried in a common grave at Ashland Cemetery. That afternoon, the acting mayor, John Means, called a meeting to raise reward money and hire detectives to find the murderers. Over $1,000 was raised in a few days, which would have been about $16,000 today. And I guess from what I understand, it's pretty common that they would hire detectives because it wasn't something that existed as an established kind of entity at the time. They had police, but the detectives were often like private detectives, which is different than it is today.
So you have to hire them instead of them just calling someone above them.
Or offer a reward, and they would kind of compete with each other. And that's what was, driving them to find the suspects.
Neat.
With that much money as bait, private detectives came from surrounding states to work on the case.
I want to hire Matthew McConaughey to come to my room and figure out this case.
He's my favorite private detective.
Did you hear he might go on season 3?
No, I did not hear that.
Just. He said if it was written well enough. Just.
Oh, so he's just kind of like,
He's
maybe.
got standards. He's saying that season 2 sucked. I'm just kidding.
Damn, them's fighting words.
I'm just kidding.
But it did.
It was no season 1.
It was. Had big shoes to fill. It's not its fault. Originally, Detective J.B. Norris from Ohio took the lead. He speculated that the killer was the father, John Gibbons, who was still out of town. There was little evidence to substantiate this charge, but nevertheless, people bought the theory and it spread quickly. Even the Cincinnati Enquirer, the area's largest newspaper, was calling for his arrest. Wanted posters were rushed to print and sent out far and wide, prompting the arrest of John Gibbons. Meanwhile, another investigator, Marshall Heflin, claimed that the crime could not have been carried out by just one person. Heflin realized that before the investigation could get back on track, John Gibbons would have to be found and cleared of the charge. On Saturday, December 31st, approximately a week after the murders, John Gibbons was located in a remote area of West Virginia. Investigator Heflin broke the heartbreaking news to Gibbons, who was still unaware of the tragedy back home. The two rode back to Ashland, where Gibbons was quickly exonerated by proof that he had been in West Virginia for the entire time. Detective Norris was extremely humiliated by this discovery and caught the first train out of town, at which point Heflin became the new lead detective.
That's so crazy, too, because you're supposed to expect the people that are closest to you, but when you're wrong...
Right?
Oops.
Yeah, I can understand why he had that theory at first, but it seemed like he just kind of put it out there and it caught fire in the media everybody took it over, and that was just the new truth instead of really trying to find him and just figure it out. Yeah. Because he, of course, should be a suspect.
It's just because he wasn't there. That's the only thing. You can't account for where he was.
Right.
So.
But as soon as you can, that should be really your first thing, is not to make him a suspect, but just to clear where he was and find an alibi for him.
Exactly. And then if he wasn't accounted for and you couldn't pinpoint, maybe then you could leak proceed. A little. Yeah.
Yeah. A few days later, George Ellis showed up at investigator Heflin's hotel room after experiencing bouts of extreme paranoia. Ellis was convinced that all of the townspeople were staring at him and thinking he was the murderer. George introduced himself and said that he lived near the Gibbons house and might know something about the murders. Heflin informed Ellis that if a person was guilty of a crime, they could turn informant on their accomplices and would likely get a much lesser sentence than the other guilty parties. And Heflin was the one that from the get-go was like, it's more than one person. Mm-hmm. That information seemed to have the desired effect on Ellis, who promptly said he wanted to relieve his conscience by making a statement. There are at least 2 versions of the first confession that Ellis made, which implicated himself, William Neal, and George Kraft, but they vary only slightly. Possibly more than one person was taking down the statement, and neither was a skilled stenographer. So possibly they could be 2 different versions only because the people taking notes were taking different accounts. So here we go. The following is the less graphic of the 2 versions. He says, I have resided in Ashland since May. I have been employed as a laborer at Powell and House's brickyard most of the time, where I am acquainted with Neil and Kraft. On December 23rd, they came to my house. I was in bed, so Kraft told me to get up. Kraft said, "You must go with us." I asked him where. He said to the Gibbons house to have some fun. I told him no, because it was too late and I won't go. They said I have to go, and Kraft drew his revolver. When we got inside the gate at the Gibbons, Kraft picked up an axe and Neil got a crowbar from under the porch floor. Kraft pried open the window and Neil was the first to go in. Kraft was next. I did not want to go in, but Kraft drew his revolver and said, "Come on in," and so I did. Kraft and Neil went to the bed where the girls were. Kraft took hold of Fanny Gibbons and Neil of Emma. They stifled the girls by putting their hands over the mouths and choking them. The noise awakened Robbie, who was sleeping on the couch in the same room. Kraft, who had almost choked Fanny to death, left her and struck Robbie in the head with the axe and killed him. Then he returned to the bed. Neil dragged Emma off the bed onto the floor, and Kraft ordered me to hold her until Neil accomplished his purpose, which I did. Afterwards, Neil let her up and began to raise up, crying. She said she was going home to her mother, and Neil said, "I think not," and struck her on the head with a crowbar, and she fell back onto the floor dead. Kraft ordered me to come and help him. I went to the bed and put my hands on Miss Gibbons' shoulders, and Kraft got an axe and killed her. Kraft then said to me, "You have done none of the killing, but you must have a hand in it," ordered me to get the coal oil and pour it over the dead bodies. I did, and Kraft set them on fire, and we left the house. When we got out, we separated. I went home, and I don't know where they went.
So he's just basically saying he had a part in it, but only to the extent to where he could tell you what happened, but he didn't really do anything.
Right.
I mean, he did.
He's pretty much saying that he wasn't involved in any of the deaths
or the rapes.
The destruction after the fact of evidence,
and
pretty much.
That he was threatened to do it
with
a gun.
Exactly. Everything he did in this whole night, according to him, was at the other end of a revolver, basically. Ellis claimed that they had been planning the crime for several months, and that on one occasion, while they were all working in the backyard together, Emma Thomas passed by and Neil swore that he intended to have carnal communication with her before Christmas.
So much worse than saying fuck her.
Yeah, that is disgusting. Ugh. Kraft had made similar statements about Fanny Gibbons. Kraft and Neil were immediately arrested and taken to the county jail in Cattlesburg, about 5 miles away. Oddly enough, they were placed in the same cell with Ellis. Right? Not surprisingly, after a night in the same cell with Kraft and Neil, Ellis recanted his confession, but it was too late. News of the confession had not been released to the public. Nevertheless, word soon spread that the 3 men had been arrested and jailed. For many, that was sufficient enough to take the matters into their own hands and talk about vigilante justice. Anxious courthouse officials began to receive reports of a mob being organized in Ashland with plans to storm the courthouse and capture the prisoners. The court, fearing the worst, ordered the 3 to be sent to jail in Lexington, Kentucky, for their own safety. They were placed on a ferry and started down the river, but the mob got wind of it and started pursuing the prisoners in a steamboat. This is amazing old-timey awesomeness.
I mean, you're not going to go that fast. Right? I think they're going there, "We're going to get you."
They're just yelling for like 45 minutes.
"Oh, you better hope we don't catch up to that ferry because you're going to get it."
After an exciting chase, well, as exciting as 5 miles per hour can be, the officers finally eluded the mob and arrived safely at the Lexington prison. On February 6, 1882, after only 17 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Neil guilty and sentenced him to hang on February 14, 1882. Wait, that's Valentine's Day. Damn.
Yeah.
A few days later, Kraft was convicted on the same evidence and was also sentenced to the gallows on the same date. On appeal, Kraft and Neil won a new trial. Many people believed the pair was innocent. Their point of view was that without the testimony of the deranged Ellis, there was no incriminating evidence. Considering that the pair won most of their appeals and execution stays, it would seem that officials in the state government were also not entirely convinced of their guilt.
I'm not either, because he just ratted them out.
Yeah, it just seems like there was nothing else that was pointing to them.
Mm-hmm. And the people were mad, so you gotta hang someone.
Yeah. The pair began retrials, and angry mobs followed them as they traveled from the courthouse to the jail. The community was demanding justice and frequently attempted to capture the prisoners to enact their own punishment. During one attempt, the angry mob even exchanged gunfire with the officers transporting the prisoners, leading to the death of 4 men. Ultimately, the officers succeeded in protecting the prisoners, so Kraft was hanged on October 12, 1883, and Neal on March 27, 1885. Oof. George Ellis would go on to confess and recant at least 6 times, each with greater conviction than the previous.
That's the only evidence they had, and he recanted a bunch of times,
right.
Changed his stories. Now, after they're hanged, you're just
it's just too late.
Yep.
Damn. In February 1882, he made a statement to a Cincinnati newspaper in which he said that he and 2 men he hired committed the murders. He said that he alone raped and killed the girls while his accomplices held them down. He said as they crept away from the Gibbons house that he saw Kraft and Neal walking along the street, and that's when he decided to put the blame on them. A few days later, he denied that he ever made that statement.
That's the truth. That's the truth, and you just hung 2
innocent dudes. Yep. On Friday, June 2nd, 1882, he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. That night, around midnight, a group of about 20 men with black hoods covering their faces took over the engine house of the Chatteroy Rail House in Ashland and ordered the watchmen to hitch up 2 flat cars so they could travel to Cattlesburg. They arrived at about 3 a.m. and gathered across the street from the jail. Converging on the jail, they demanded to be let in, but were refused. Storming it by force, George Ellis was soon led out. He was taken back to Ashland, where he was hanged on a sycamore tree near the scene of the murders. Death was ruled to come at the hands of a person or persons unknown, and nobody was ever charged for the Ellis murders.
Yes. Gotta love that vigilantism. Also, it's...
Like, I don't want to applaud it, but I'm also just like... in those situations where it's like you have to put yourself in the family members of the victims. Mm-hmm. It's just, I don't know what I would do,
Oh, I'd hang them. I do worse. What's crazy too is that in the beginning of the story, I kind of like the detective that was more onto it, whatever his name was with the H or something, the cooler detective. But if you think about it, those 2 men, if they were innocent, kind of died because of that guy. Because that guy was like, hey, if you committed a crime... pretty much, if you rat someone out, you'll get a lesser sentence. So he was like, oh, I saw those 2 dudes. Let me just blame it on them. And he would have never gotten that idea. And that guy fucking ratted himself out. He would have never even been a suspect if he didn't go up and say, because of extreme paranoia, and say that everyone was staring at him. He ratted himself out and then ratted these dudes out to get a lesser sentence. So I'm glad that guy got fucking hung from a sycamore tree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was started off by the second detective when he said it couldn't have been one person, which he was right. But that's, it made it kind of more concrete. And then once he was ready to confess, which clearly he of anybody was involved. No matter who his accomplices were, there. It was definitely him. And so it set his mind in motion to just find 2 other people. And he may not even known the people that he hired or the people that he actually did it with, whether he hired them or not or whatever those sort of details are. He was the main person behind it, I believe. Yeah.
So, and he's the one that masterminded then, too. If he's the one that hired him. At first, he said it was the other 2 dudes forcing him. But in the end, you were the one that planned it all. You were the one who premeditated it.
Yeah. That's just a crazy, crazy story. And there's a lot more details out there about it. I didn't want to make it too long. But, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth of just like the traveling to and from the courts and the different things that happen in the courts. And I just kind of shortened it up. But it seemed like it was so much drama for such a long time, taking over the entire town. And that's why it got so heated and eventually led to them taking him out of the jail because everybody was in a frenzy for not just like a week or a month, but just for years of just frenzied hatred for this guy.
And keeping them there was like 4 people died. Protecting this guy. Fuck that.
Yeah.
No, just let them. I mean, they probably just turned a blind eye and was like, we can't do this much longer.
Right.
So
yeah.
just take them.
It may have just been protecting their police officers.
Yeah, might
knowing
as well.
that they were in danger every single day that they held him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Justice is served.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Murder Dictionary. Woo. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe, and go to our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Backpage.
And yes, Kelly's on Backpage.
Craigslist.
Holla. And definitely go to your local street corner and just yell.
Yep.
Just tons of screaming Murder Dictionary. Yep. We appreciate you. Happy holidays to everybody. Thank you so much for listening.
Happy holidays.